but not necessarily specific targets. Is that your read on what Peter Dutton is saying? Because he said that he's not going to, when it comes to a target, he says, we'll work that out when we're in government. But you're saying there needs to be other detail to be fleshing out the pathway to get to net zero.
Well, I mean, you have to show how you're going to achieve something. I mean, ultimately, we're in the Paris Agreement. We signed Australia up to the Paris Agreement. We're in for net zero. So we'll have to show people how we're going to do that. And I'm sure that will be forthcoming. Don't forget, we voted against the Labor Party's 43% target when the legislation was presented in this term of Parliament. So not a lot of this is new, is my sense, Kieran. We voted against the bill. We've not been big supporters of legislating targets. And in fact, when we've been in government, we have announced our international commitments at these fora, but we have not sought to codify them into domestic legislation because that's not essential.
Does the vacuum, though, in terms of having a target for 2030 or those midterm targets, does it open up the room within the coalition for voices like that of Matt Canavan or Keith Pitt, who are arguing we should get out of Paris, your fellow coalition colleagues?
Well, I don't think that the party and the coalition is going to leave Paris, so I'm not worried about that. And most people who look at this closely will look for two key points. Are you in Paris and are you in for net zero 2050? And the answer to both questions is yes. The rest is noise.
So, okay, they're the two main points. So you're not as harsh on the government for its 2030 target. The argument that they're going to fall short has been condemned by Ted O'Brien and Peter Dutton.
Well, that's their approach. I mean, we haven't favoured codifying these international agreements into domestic legislation. And there are a lot of other countries that agree that's not always necessary. So just because you legislate something doesn't mean it's going to happen. I mean, Labor's got a 1.2 million new houses target they've got no chance of meeting. So sometimes targets aren't worth all the effort people spend on making. Frankly, what really counts is actually getting the outcome.
Sophie Scomps says you've given up on those Teal seats. I asked her today on this program, do you feel that they've given up? And she says 100% they've given up on seats like hers. What do you say to that?
Well, that may well be in her political interest to make that statement, but we've always been a party that sought to govern for all Australians, and that's why we are committed to net zero, and we are in fact the party that signed Australia up to the net zero agreement after a lot of internal debate. So that is an important policy for a lot of people who live in seats like Mackellar, and I think ultimately that's what people will be looking for. Are you in these international agreements and are you doing your fair share or are you not? And I'm sure that we can give them a categoric yes.
Peter Dutton says Sophie Scomps is more of a green than a teal. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, all you have to do is look at the voting record of a lot of these people and you will see that in the main they are voting with Labor and the Greens in the Parliament on most issues. And the reality is that most people who live in those seats would be more Liberal coalition inclined. So they are often misaligned with their communities. And that's something that we need to make sure that we talk about widely between now and the election, because ultimately the representatives have to work on behalf of the people.
We've got another representative coming up, Allegra Spender. I'm sure she'll like to have a few words on that. Andrew Bragg, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, KG.